Hello, viewers. I hope everybody's having a good start of the week. This is Lisa in Connecticut, Connecticut Worms and Gardens, and I want to take a quick peek in on the two bins I've been referring to recently as the twins. They are two bus boxes containing European night crawlers of approximately equal amount of worms, and they have been fed at the same time with pretty much the same food and watered at the same time, so they should be pretty close to one another in how well they're doing or not doing. And I figured it's just easiest, since they're so close to one another in care regimen, to check on them at the same time. So just looking at the top surface, it looks nice and damp. It doesn't look like it's needing any moisture. As you saw me just remove a piece of bubble wrap. That's all I have on top of this bin, and it is doing its job. At first glance and first feel, the bin looks to be in good shape. I don't see any critters that are unwelcome, although there probably are a few. At least fungus gnats in here. You see right up here on the top, I see a baby. Now these are, again, if I didn't mention it, these are European night crawlers in here. They originally came from Midwest Worms, and they were pretty sizable when I got them. They have shrunk some because I don't feed them manure like they were eating at Midwest Worms, but they're still very productive despite not being quite as large as they were. So I just want to go through, check the bin, check its moisture, check its inhabitants, see if, they're producing as they should be, and determine what their food needs might be right now, if any. I don't remember where I fed this bin last. It's usually on one end or the other. This is a pretty good sized worm right here. So, and you can see one of his offspring just hitchhiked onto my hand. The castings look nice. The bin is really breaking down quite well at this point. Just take a closer look at the color and texture and overall appearance of the castings that they have produced thus far. And there's another one of its little inhabitants. Somewhere these worms are hanging out, probably down this very edge. It's probably the edge I fed them on, so let me push this back a little bit. Here's another young'un that may be 10 days old. That one there, I would estimate. Oh yes, they're all down this end. Let me rotate the bin. I've turned the bin around so that the worms are at the end farthest from the camera, because when they were right under it, there was just no way to get a peek in there. Too close. Uh-oh, we have a drop off here on the edge. A little baby. Another little baby. So we can see down here, which is where the worms are hanging out. Excuse me. Oh yes, they got raspberries from my garden this past year. I had put a bunch of them in. I used the food saver sealer and sealed a bunch of the blackberries off my blackberry bushes, and that is what they got for their last feeding. And it looks like there is some food left, so I'm not gonna offer them any more food right now. Again, the worms, they're in the feeding area. You can see the blackberries here. They're actually not looking as black now. Starting to get broken down and munched on. I'm sure these worms are loving that. If there's one thing they like, it's mushy fruit. Here's another new addition to that bin. Okay, let's keep going here. Okay, here's some more of the worms, of course, hanging out down here where the food was provided. And that's a nice handful of euros right there. This one here looks to be, well, it's not a brand new one, but it's not very old. Just kind of take a glance through them. If I remember correctly, this was only, originally it was a pound of worms that I originally split equally between 2 bus bins, and they reproduced pretty impressively, and I took a large number of the young only recently and added them to the urban worm bag. So we're going to see that when we check in the urban worm bag. I also put a bunch of the cocoons in there. So again, you can see up close the castings that they are making and enjoying. The old expression, you made your bed, you lie in it. Boy, does that come true for these guys. They made their bedding and they love lying in it and eating it and reproducing in it. Okay. Let me just keep turning here. Again, you can see the castings are really dark. They're moist but not wet. They are not clumpy in any way. There's still plenty of bedding in this bin, so we don't need to add any. And although there is only a very small amount of food, there's maybe a dozen blackberries left in here. I'm going to let them finish that before I add any more food. Because the one thing that's worse than underfeeding is overfeeding, and that's when you start to get fruit flies and fungus gnats and potworms, and if they run out of fresh food, they will eat their bedding, their leaves, their shredded cardboard. But too much food just leads to, it can turn acidic, and then you get all kinds of problems after that. So again, here's another little critter here, right on the top. So this bin is looking really good. Like I said, there's a good amount of bedding in here in terms of cardboard and leaves, so I don't need to add any of that. The worms are definitely most heavily populated at the end where the food is located, but I'm also seeing them all throughout the bin, which tells me they're just dining on the carbon in general. And this end down here, where I did not have the blackberries, is drier, which of course makes sense since blackberries are a pretty moist food, especially since these were in the freezer and the cell walls have all ruptured. Okay, well, this bin, I'm very happy with the way that it looks. There's a lot of young worms in here. Again, you can see another one here that's just probably not even a month old at this point. And as I'm scattering through, I'm seeing a bunch that age. So even though I offloaded a bunch into the urban worm bag, there's a lot of hatchlings in here as well. And as they grow, this bin is going to become quite populated once again, which I'm definitely not unhappy about. Okay, so just flipping the contents around in general, you can see that it's very light, very fluffy. Somehow light and fluffy. That sounds like a TV commercial for something. It's light and fluffy. I can't remember what. Pancakes. That's it, pancakes. Well, this is not a pancake, but to the worms it is, I'm sure. Okay, well, this looks really good. I don't see anything that it needs right now. Within a couple of days, it will need food, but I just prefer to keep the food on the lean side. I have found much less problems with mites or fungus gnats, fruit flies, anything like that with keeping the food to a small amount. Now you can see there is a potworm, which is the white worm on the piece of cardboard, and a newborn euro. So you can see the drastic color difference. One is pink, one is pure white. And there's a bunch of sprouts in here, as always. And the worms thoroughly enjoy their sprouts. There's another young in there. So, okay, this bin looks good. Let me pause the camera and I'm going to pull the other one up. Okay, I've got the other bin up on the counter. Let's take off its top. I see on this, I see fruit flies. I don't know if you can see them crawling around down there, but there are definitely fruit flies. Now, I find that very interesting because these two bins are maintained identically, and they are right up against one another on the floor in the same room. They are given the same food at the same time in the same amount, and one had fruit flies clearly, and the other excuse me, still got a little bit of COVID lingering. The other does not. As you can see on top of the bubble wrap here, there's a young worm there, and nope, that is not a worm. I thought we had a very tiny one. Uh-oh, this guy here, this worm here, oh no, I thought he got in the middle of the bubble wrap, but he didn't. This baby here is just hanging out on the bottom. Okay, I'm just going to fold this up so he doesn't get dried out. So this on top here, this is a piece of comfrey root that's been kicking around in here, and it is still alive. I keep breaking off the growing parts that it produces and putting it in there because they love it. All right, let's start looking for our worms. Now this bin does seem to be a little wetter than its brother or sister or twin. And that could explain why I'm seeing some fruit flies. Now the white substance that you're seeing, I had added a little bit of the worm chow when I fed the other bin we'll be checking in on today, which is the pumpkin versus chow experiment in the blue worm bin. I had a little left over, so I just kind of spread it amongst my different bins. So that's what you're seeing in here. It's not a mold of any kind. Again, you can see here another relatively young worm on its way to growing to size. Now I did see those few worms on the top cover, the fruit flies, but I'm not seeing any in the bin. So it may be just that the moisture, the condensation that collected on that mylar covered bubble wrap. It's actually bubble wrap, but it has mylar, reflective mylar on the outside. Maybe there's something about that they enjoy, but I'm not seeing any in here. I'm not seeing any crawling. I'm not seeing any flying. This is a really fat euro right here. So I will put a bit of apple cider vinegar in a container around the bins, but I don't think there's a big problem. But I don't want it to become a big problem. Again, here you can see some new newbies. We'll call them newbies. And similar to the other bin, again, here's another Really nice looking adult here. Similar to the other bin, the casting quality is, I'm very happy with it. It is not muddy in any way. It is not, compacted. It's loose. It's fluffy. It's got a good ratio of bedding still mixed in with it. So the contents look really nice. I'm very pleased with how this is coming along. And I think this bin is about 3 weeks old now. I'm going to double check on that for sure. But, I'm trying to run these all on a 7-week cycle, start to finish, contents in to contents out, 7 weeks. If it goes to 8 weeks, that's okay. But any longer than that just isn't necessary. So let's see. I don't see the big ball of worms we saw in the other bin. I think maybe I put the food in this bin in a different area. So we'll keep digging around. Actually, it looks like what it looks like to me is there is less food in this bin. I actually only seen 2 blackberries, which is pretty stingy on my part, huh? So I think, here's some blackberries down here. I think they're kind of just foraging right now, which is great. Another very young one in my hand there. I like to of course I want to keep my worms with food, but at the same time, their bedding is there. The carbon part of their bedding is there for them to also convert that to casting. So if I feed so much food they don't ever turn to the bin contents, then it won't get utilized as it should. So yeah, there's just as many worms in here. They're just a little bit more scattered around. I think they're kind of looking for food. I may add a little bit more food to this today. And if I do, I will add some to the other bin as well, because I have been doing these parallel just so I can, remember what I did. Because if I did it to one, I'm going to do it to the other. All right. Scoop up from the bottom. I'm seeing an awful lot of young worms in here. Yeah, I'm not sure why, but the winter weather has really brought a lot of babies. I mean, this right, let's see, I can get you a little bit more focused. I mean, right here, this is another, well, that one's not as young as I thought, but there's a lot of young ones in here. And I offloaded a bunch recently. I guess as fast as I take them out, they're going to replenish themselves. Not a bad problem to have, if you ask me. So these 2 bins are pretty uneventful. Exactly how I want to see them. They don't need any moisture. They don't need any bedding. They don't have any pest problem. I was concerned when I saw the few fruit flies on that covering, but I have not seen a single fruit fly in here. Not crawling, not flying, not doing anything. And I'm seeing a ton of hatchlings in here. Every handful I turn over, there's adults and there's a whole bunch of hatchlings as well. So I'll pull something out of the freezer. It's probably going to be more raspberries because I have blackberries. I have a ton of blackberries in my freezer. Although I do still have one pumpkin left from Halloween. It has never been frozen. It's still, believe it or not, holding up well inside the house. It's a smaller pumpkin, but it hasn't decayed yet. I'm very surprised about that. This is well beyond its normal life expectancy. It hasn't started attracting any bugs or anything. So yeah, the contents look good. The worms look good. It's not massively populated, but given how many newborn and young worms, teenagers, that are in here, the population is going to be going up and up. And, I'll have to decide, do I want to let this get really populated? Do I want to put more into the urban worm bag? See another teenager right here. Do I want to put more into the urban worm bag? Do I want to start another bin? So that's, what I'll have to decide as these babies get bigger. See here, just the stem that was attached to a piece of blackberry. They stripped it clean. So at this point now, let me see here. I just saw a baby worm. Look at this little guy. At this point now, I have scattered the blackberries all throughout the contents, which is fine. Worms don't need their food to be put at one end. Here's one right here. Actually, I like to scatter the food sometimes. Sometimes I do a standard feeding in one end or the other. Sometimes I'll do down the middle. However, sometimes I scatter it about. I'll just kind of scatter it, all over, and then cover it up. And my thinking behind that is, if the food is scattered, then the worms are going to have to go all throughout the bin to eat, which keeps the contents of the bin aerated more and turned more and castings deposited all throughout it versus just in the feeding area or feeding zone, as some refer to it as. I've seen a couple of my bins where I continuously fed. This little guy sticking out. He's sticking out of a little piece of cardboard like, hello. A couple of my bins where I fed repeatedly in the same spot, and I found that, the worms were kind of just hanging out around there, like hovering up to a bar at happy hour, and some of the rest of the bin wasn't being touched or hardly being touched. So I realized that was my own fault. If I just keep putting food in one spot in one corner, they don't have a reason to stray very far to, utilize the rest of what the bin has to offer them. So I'm trying, even if I feed in one area versus scatter it. Look at this big guy across my wrist here. He just decided to make himself into a bracelet. If I feed in one spot for a few times, then I'll do a feeding where I just scatter the contents all over the bin, because I want them to go all throughout it. Deep, top, middle, side to side. Sometimes I'll do the X. I'll feed in one corner, then I'll feed over here, then over here, then down here. And I just think it's a good idea. It's what I do. Everybody has a different approach. None are any better than any other. I think all in all, the worms are going to get the food no matter what. But I like the idea of having them having to travel for their food, albeit not very far, because these bus boxes, I think, are only 17 inches long, so they don't have to go very far, even if they had to go to the other end. But I don't want them to stay in one spot and not have the rest of the bin eaten and churned and consumed. So that's my thinking behind that. I think the baby's trying to hitchhike on top of the mommy or daddy, or mommy and daddy. All right, well, both of these bins look really good. This one is, I guess they're both going to get food. Like I said, if I feed one, I feed the other, because I do treat them both identical. And I'm going to take care of that now, which is something I'll do off camera. and put them away until the next check-in. And now I need to go do the video of the Monday update I promised on the blue worms, where I'm doing the pumpkin versus chow. And we checked that one time before, and the pumpkin was completely gone. And so we couldn't really say which attracted more because they had already, started to go to the chow side. So I said this time I would check in sooner while they were still actively feeding at both sources of food, so we could see, in fact, which did attract or which has attracted more. So, all right, guys, well, that's it for these Euros. It's pretty uneventful. Nothing to see here because there's nothing needed here but some food that I'll give them off camera. They don't need bedding. They don't need moisture. They don't need heat. Like I said, I saw a couple of insects, but turned out those were about it. So don't even have that to worry about. I'll give them their comfy root back, which is the only difference between these bins. I could snap it in half, but it's not really a big deal. Put these guys back and move on to the next. All right, I'll see you soon. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, kindly do if you would. And share this video and my channel with anybody that you think might enjoy the content. Please stay safe, stay healthy, be happy, and have a great day, everybody.